Once there was a woodcutter with two children and their stepmother. The boy's name was Hansel, and the girl's name was Gretel. They lived so poorly that sometimes there was not even anything to eat. And then one evening he lay in bed, pondering how to feed the children further. His wife advised him to have children in the forest, light a fire, give a piece of bread each and leave them there, not all four of them die of hunger. But the woodcutter did not agree. And until then, his wife persuaded him that he finally agreed. And the children, because of hunger, also could not sleep and heard everything that their stepmother said to their father. And when the parents fell asleep, Hansel secretly rushed out of the house. The moon was shining brightly, and the white stones glittered like coins. Hansel pocketed as many of them as he could fit. Then he returned home and the children went to bed. In the morning, the stepmother came to the children, gave each of them a piece of bread, and they all went to the forest together. On the way, Hansel threw out white stones one by one. When they arrived at the clearing, my father began to light a fire. He ordered the children to sit near the fire and make sure that it didn't go out, while they and their stepmother would go for more firewood. They sat, tired, and fell fast asleep. When the children woke up, it was a dark night all around. And when a full month had risen in the sky, Hansel took his sister by the hand and went, looking for the way through the pebbles, which glittered like new coins, and showed them the way. They walked all night long, and at dawn they came to their father's house. Some time passed. And the children again heard how the stepmother one night began to beg their father to get rid of the children. He refused, but his wife did not want to listen to him. She cursed and expressed all sorts of reproaches to him. When the parents fell asleep, Hansel, like the last time, wanted to collect stones, but the stepmother locked the door and the boy could not leave the house.
Thank you.
Early in the morning, the children were given a piece of bread each, even less than the previous time. On the way to the forest, Hansel shredded his piece in his pocket and threw the crumbs on the ground. The stepmother took them even further into the forest. Again a big fire was lit, and the father ordered the children to watch the fire while they and their stepmother chopped some more wood. When lunchtime came, Gretel shared her piece of bread with Hansel. And they fell asleep. We woke up when the dark night fell. And then a month came up, and they got together on their way, but they could not find a single crumbs, because thousands of birds fluttering in the forest had long been eating those crumbs. So the children walked for a very long time, but they could not get out of the forest. Suddenly, the road led them to the hut. Coming closer, the children saw that the house was all built of bread and biscuits, and the windows were made of pure sugar. Hansel reached up and broke off a piece of the roof, while Gretel went to the window and began gnawing at its windows. And then the door in the hut opened wide, and the old woman came out, leaning on a crutch. Hansel and Gretel were so scared that they even dropped their tidbits from their hands. And the old woman was kind and invited them to her hut. There was already abundant food on the table: milk, cookies, apples, and nuts. After dinner, the old woman made 2 clean beds for the children, and Hansel and her sister thought they were in heaven. But the old woman only pretended to be affectionate, but in fact she was an evil witch, who built her bread hut for this purpose in order to lure children. Early in the morning, while the children were sleeping, she took Hansel and put him in a small cage. And she ordered her sister to do everything that the wicked witch demanded of her. The old woman decided to fatten the boy in order to eat him later. So Gretel began to cook the most delicious food for Hansel, and she herself got nothing but leftovers. Some time passed, and the boy did not get fat. Then the old woman did not want to wait any longer, and decided to cook and eat Hansel. She ordered Gretel to light the stove and apply water. When the stove warmed up, the old woman ordered her to climb into the stove and see if it was hot enough. So she wanted to push the girl into the fire and bake her. But Gretel knew what was on her mind. She said that she did not know how to get in there, and asked the witch to show herself. The old woman got angry and climbed into the oven. Then Gretel pushed her and slammed the shutter behind the witch. Wow, how terribly the old woman howled then. Gretel, meanwhile, rushed to Hansel and opened the cage. Having freed their brother, they went to the witch's room, in which there were boxes of pearls and precious stones in all corners, filled their pockets with them, and went home. For several days the children were looking for their way back. The forest seemed more and more familiar, and at last they saw their father's house in the distance. How glad he was to see his children alive. Hansel and Gretel poured on the floor all the pearls and gems they had taken from the witch. There was no need to think about food. And they began to live, live, and rejoice. And the father drove the evil stepmother out of the house. Lemuel Gulliver spent 5 whole months with his wife and children in England, but the craving for travel turned out to be stronger. So, having become the captain of the adventurer ship, Gulliver set off on another voyage. He recruited 50 crew members, but as it turned out, not all of the crew were honest people. Once, under cover of night, traitors rioted a ship, broke into Gulliver's cabin, and tied him up. For 3 days the crew kept the former captain locked up. And on the 4th day, the traitors landed Gulliver on an unknown land, left him some provisions and sailed north. The former captain had no choice but to head inland. On the way, he met the tracks of horses, which gave Gulliver hope for an early rescue. Suddenly a humanoid figure appeared on the horizon.
Cool!
Gulliver narrowed his eyes and saw her. It was a strange-looking monkey with dark skin and curly hair. These animals had long claws on their paws. They looked so dangerous that Gulliver held his breath and leaned against the tree behind.
Oh no!
But then something grabbed the traveler's shoulders and pulled him up. These were 2 exactly the same monkeys who tried to drag their prey up the tree. Gulliver struggled to fight back with his hands, but the animals were stronger. While Gulliver fought in an unequal battle, the sound of hooves was heard. Noticing the approaching horse, the monkeys threw Gulliver and ran away in terror. Having approached, the horse examined Gulliver with interest.
Cool!
Then a second horse came up, they greeted each other with a kick of their front hooves and walked to the side. The horses behaved so intelligently that it seemed to Gulliver that they were wizards who turned into horses. Finally, after consulting, the horses ordered Gulliver to follow them. This time, Gulliver ended up in a country inhabited by intelligent horses, the Gims.
Okay.
And the strange monkeys who attacked Gulliver served the Gims as pets and did all the dirty work. So the traveler was brought to a house where a manger with hay stretched along the wall and other horses were stationed. The horse gestured to Gulliver to eat some hay, but the traveler noticed a bucket of milk and asked for a drink from it. After dinner, Gulliver, under the close supervision of horses, collected oats and baked bread from it. This amazed the Gims so much that they began to teach Gulliver their language and culture. The horses turned out to be not only intelligent, but also very noble. They did not know the words anger, envy, deception, and enmity. They were surprised by Gulliver's stories about money, ships, and states. But most of all, the Gims were outraged by the fact that people allow themselves to ride horses. Over time, Gulliver became so imbued with love and respect for the Gims that he decided never to return to people again. However, every 4th year, a council of representatives was convened in the country, where they discussed the main state of affairs. Gulliver, as an ape-like creature, was not allowed to be present at the meeting. However, out of curiosity, he secretly entered the meeting, hiding in a haystack. It turned out that the Gims had long considered the strange monkeys useless, and therefore decided to drive them out. And Gulliver with them. Without waiting for his fate, the traveler hastily made a boat and went to the nearest island. Gulliver decided to spend the rest of his life away from people who were nasty to him. However, the island turned out to be the coast of Australia. Gulliver was seen by sailors from a Portuguese ship and taken to the ship. The captain decided that Gulliver has lost his mind, so he does not want to return home and tells his tales about intelligent horses. When Gulliver was brought to London, he learned to bear the sight of people with great difficulty. He got used to his wife and children only after a year, but even then he did not allow himself to be touched.
No.
And for the rest of his life, Gulliver communicated only with the stallions he bought.